Welcome to the Outer Circle, Inner Stillness, conversations and reflections on the inner life, the spiritual life, the sober way of life, how these all work together. And I'm delighted to be here when we're filming this a Monday morning. And I'm here with Sister Lisa.
Yeah.
And
Hello.
Hello. It's really great to talk to you. We haven't talked in person in a long time, but
very long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we were so I first knew Lisa I think in undergrad back at Multnomah. We came through that I don't know, crucible maybe a little bit too strong of a word, but it was definitely a formative place for a lot of people. Yes. But would you say a little bit more about who you are now, where you're at, and what are you up to these days?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the unique thing about both of us is that both of us attended a Protestant university, and neither of us are Protestant anymore.
It's true.
So that's a good place to start. So I attended there. I also had started the master's in program in counseling there as well, similar to what you did, I believe. I ended up switching gears halfway through. I just realized clinical licensure wasn't up my alley, so I went for a master's in pastoral studies. But thankfully, they took all my credits, so it became sort of like a pastoral counseling. So I can do all the spiritual counseling stuff, but nothing clinical whatsoever, since I'm not able to ever be licensed. But I ended up entering the Catholic Church back in 2015. And in the middle of the pandemic, the Lord said, "Hey, guess what? Now I want you to be a nun." And actually, not just an established, like, legit nun. I would like you to found a new order. And so it's been quite an adventure since. I was in Southern California with an already established order, trying to help them found an order of women, and then ended up switching gears and moving out here to the middle of nowhere, Arizona, and working to build a new religious order from the ground up. So it's constantly challenging. If our alma mater was a crucible, this is just crazy. I don't know. But
this is crucible times 10.
It's crucible times 10 for sure. It's crucifixion. Daily crucifixion.
All right. I love it. Cool.
So that's me.
That's you. That's awesome. Can I ask some questions there?
Yes, please.
Okay. So it's the middle of nowhere, Arizona. So what town or what gulch?
So I live in St. John's, Arizona. So it's a Catholic named town after St. John the Baptist. But I'm surrounded by Mormons.
There we go.
It's very interesting out here.
Yeah. I know a little bit of Arizona geography. So Where are you in relation to Phoenix?
I am northeast of Phoenix in an area called the White Mountains.
Okay. Oh, so maybe a little closer to Flagstaff. Yeah.
So if you went up to Flagstaff and then headed directly east, there's actually an exit off of the highway before you hit New Mexico, where you can go south. And so if you take that exit, go straight south, you hit St. John's. So
all right.
It snows up here. It gets below freezing. It's Arizona, but it's high desert Arizona. So it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, that is really beautiful. One of my best friends grew up in Flagstaff, and so I had occasion to visit him fairly often. And yeah, it was very different. It didn't look like your stereotypical desert in Arizona. It's foresty and everything.
Yeah, and Flagstaff is foresty. So as you drive past Flagstaff east, you'll get into the less foresty area. So on the converse, when I first went to Flagstaff the first time, I'm driving and it's just barren, lots of bushes, nothing much going on. And then all of a sudden, trees. And I was like, oh, trees, this is beautiful. So I love going to Flagstaff because it reminds me a little bit of Oregon. So that's nice.
It does indeed. Although as I remember, there's only like one kind of pine. But
yes,
anyway.
Yes.
So I hope you like Ponderosa. But
we found out recently that if you take the pine needles from Ponderosa pine, I mean they're really long needles, and you put them in some water with lemon and some sugar, it'll ferment and make kind of like a soda that tastes like Sprite.
Ooh.
Fascinating things you learn out here in the middle of nowhere.
I might just have to try that.
There's YouTube videos about it, so look it up. There's tutorials and everything.
Okay.
It doesn't have quite the carbonation of soda, but it distinctly has the flavor. It tasted like Sprite.
Okay, I might be able to sell that as a homeschool project. So,
it'd be a great one. It really would.
Indeed, yeah. So, so for non-Catholic listeners,
yes,
what is a monastic order? What does that mean? And then later I'll ask, what does it mean to start a new one?
That could be a long question. So a monastic order in Catholicism, what we do is we focus on growing in holiness and serving the church, really. So growing in holiness in our own spiritual life, in each individual, but then also serving the church either through prayer, if it's a cloistered, more private sort of community, which I think sometimes people traditionally think of Catholic nuns as more cloistered and private, or a more active community where we go out into the public and we're serving as teachers and nurses and a variety of other different things. So, but the main purpose is really to grow in holiness, grow in personal holiness. That's why a lot of people feel led to enter, even if they're not called to it. They feel that strong desire to separate themselves from the world and from the average everyday life and dedicate themselves fully to God and just growing in their relationship with God and in holiness. So feeling called by God, you might not feel called to either of those things, but sometimes the Lord says, well, I've called you to it anyway. Thankfully, I had both a desire for growing in holiness and also serving. So when the Lord tapped me on the shoulder, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is my heart, right up my alley. Let's go. Let's do this.
That sounds very exciting. I could see where, yes, one might fight the Lord on this.
Go ahead.
Because I imagine it's not easy, or like you're saying, it sounds like there's a lot of difficulties that come with it.
Yeah. It's, I mean, our vocation as humans, from a Catholic perspective, our vocation as humans is to love God and love others, and to grow in that holiness of devotion to God, to looking more like Jesus. And we talk about how that happens through the vocation that God calls you to. So whether that be marriage, or whether that be religious life, or whether that be something uniquely single even, the Lord has called us all to become more like him, to grow in that holiness, to look like Jesus. And so our vocation is meant to refine us. And so therefore all vocations require necessarily some sort of sacrifice. So for example, you're married with children. There's a lot of sacrifice that goes into that. You can't just do whatever you want on a Friday night. Likewise, when I'm trying to live this religious life, do my prayers 7 times a day and go out and serve people, I'm viewing the entire community up here as my children and trying to meet their needs and help them grow. Both vocations are hard. It's all about what the Lord has called you to.
It's hard to do there's a lot of sacrifice if I want to do it well.
Yes.
I could easily be all about myself and just be like, I want what I want, which sometimes I do anyway, confession.
Because we're all humans, it happens.
Right. But when I'm doing my vocation well is when I'm able to, if not outright, first at least balance the needs of everyone around me. And that's maybe my softer approach to it. But there's to do anything well takes sacrifice. We're just in the Orthodox Church, the day of recording this yesterday was the Sunday of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross. And so we're talking about picking up one's cross. And and my priest was talking about how the Christian life is hard. It's just hard. It's hard. And going on about how like, here's all of these other things. Like, you see doctors, you see sports stars, you see these other people who are like, oh yeah, I'll do all of these labors and all of this schooling and all of this early morning rising for the sake of like doing this thing. Why should our faith be any different? So yeah, it's difficult.
Well, even Paul references athletes when he's saying you have to discipline your body just like an athlete or just like a soldier. So yeah, Paul got it.
He got it. Yeah. He went through some things. Some things, yeah.
Some things.
Yeah.
Sacrifices.
Stonings with rocks. So I love your thoughts on this. So yeah, on this show, we talk a lot around sobriety and recovery and, recovery from, drug and alcohol addiction, sex addiction, lots of things. And that's also very hard. It's hard to do well. It's hard to do long. And then that ends up being a question that comes up a lot is like, okay, so I've gotten a little bit of abstinence. Now what? Or how long do I have to be abstinent? Or I'm plugged into groups. How long do I have to go to groups? And what are some things you've discovered about how to sustain your labors? Seems like the order or having the order, being part of the order offers a sense of purpose and offers something like a goal. Something like a vision. When it inevitably gets difficult, how do you persist?
I think you hit on it with having that goal. So you always have that vision in mind of where you're going and why you're doing what you're doing. Similar to talking about vocations, are you making these sacrifices just for the heck of it? Or are you making them because of love, because you love your spouse, you love your children, or you love the Lord and what he's called you to. So there's having that goal of why am I doing this? Is it self-serving? Is it for others? When it comes to sobriety, hopefully the answer is both even, hopefully you're doing it for yourself as well as for others. But so not just having that goal though, but having consistency. And I think there's a lot to be said for having foundations built in your day, things that become habit, that become part of your day, that keep you on track with your goals and keep you on track with, especially if your goal is sobriety. So if it's whatever addiction it is, having those safeguards put in place and having those habits established that keep you sober, that keep you healthy, that keep you clear-minded and clear-minded, sober. Because all of these addictions cloud our judgment and cloud our minds and keep us from our goals, so for example, to relate it to religious life, because there is a daily dying to yourself and to what you want. It doesn't matter how rough of a night sleep I had. Our matins starts at 6 a.m. So I have to get up. I have to get up. And whether there's somebody pushing me to get up or not, I have to get up. And that's not something that's done easily, but when it's done consistently, you don't even think about it anymore. And you look forward to it even. You have that foundation built in your life. So for somebody struggling with any sort of addiction, it could be just a tiny first step, not something as grandiose, maybe as making sure you're up every morning, to meet the sun at 6 a.m. and to do morning prayers, but something that's going to aid you throughout your day and giving your day a good foundation to start so that you're staying on track for your goals and you're living your sobriety out. And again, I keep trying to think of examples, but I'm like, there's so many different kinds of addictions out there.
There really are. And in a lot of other conversations I talk around what is addiction, and you kind of manage to implicate everybody, because it's, addiction is not about drugs. It's not about sex. It's about your relationship to a thing that keeps you out of yourself. And that could be TV, it could be sugar. I think in some cases it could be like, religious labors if you don't really understand what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are, in entering into this world of religious life in regards to Catholicism specifically, I don't know how it is in Eastern Orthodoxy. I've met a variety of women who have had really amazing experiences as religious and have grown in holiness, and have also had really challenging experiences where they've had to rethink, why did I get into this in the first place? Like, was it because I was obsessing too much about my faith? Was I trying to be OCD about my faith? Was I trying to be, there's a word for it, I can't think of it, but overly pious, unctuous. I think that was it, something like that. I'll have to look that one up later. But you can obsess about your faith to the point where it's really unhealthy and it's an addiction. And so in regards to that, at least, I can say it's really imperative to have a spiritual director, to have somebody, whether it's a priest or someone who's just further along spiritually, who can be like, whoa, pump the brakes. Like, why are you doing that so much? What is going on there? How many rosaries are you praying a day? Like, one is heroic. That's 20 minutes. That's a solid 20 minutes of prayer. Good job. Why are you praying so many? So like you said, addiction can come in all forms.
Yeah. Addiction, obsession. It seems like when you talk around the person who's being overly pious, like in clinical language, as we talk around like the different parts of a person, we'll sometimes talk about like spiritualizer parts or something where it's not really the true essence of a person that's yearning for God. It's more of like this internal manager that's usually like anxious or fearful or maybe prideful, and like on the surface doing the good things, but not quite for the right reason. And thus it can be more of this obsessive compulsive sort of thing rather than just like the outpouring of like, wow, like I'm actually, experiencing the divine light of Christ and walking in the Holy Spirit. So, yeah.
And that, I was going to say that can get into, I don't know if you guys have this as much in Orthodoxy, but Catholics get a horrible rap for it. But it can get into that where it looks more like we're focusing too much on externals and maybe our heart's not in the right place. So, you're praying rosaries and you're talking to saints and all this kind of stuff. Like, do you even know what you're doing anymore? And there's particular cultures, even within Catholicism, that have actually gone a bad route. Like you can see within almost an entire culture, they've taken something that's good and pure and holy and focused so much on it that they've, what's the word I'm looking for? They've tainted it entirely and they've turned it into an idol and they've turned it into an obsession.
I think so. Yeah. No, I was talking with this, talking about this with my priest in confession recently, talking about how, so it's Lent. I really enjoy the Lenten season and I enjoy the extra rigors, and I was finding myself, as I'm wont to do, getting caught up in the fasting, or like oftentimes within my general practice, I'll kind of get caught up in the trappings of like, oh, I love icons, I love candles, I love, saying the prayers, and I love the saints and everything. And I can sometimes forget about Jesus a little bit. And my priest was affirming to me that, yeah, like the danger of Orthodoxy is to get caught up in the trappings, because we do have a lot of them. So yeah. I appreciate the thread to really keep in mind, what this is all about. This is about, Christ crucified, Christ risen, and that has to be the center of what we do, and growing in holiness, growing in love for Christ. And admittedly, I mean, that sort of thing could probably happen like in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of people in a lot of traditions have access to like that core of things. And
yes,
we'd probably say we have better tools for it, but debate. But yeah, if we lose sight of that, go ahead.
I was gonna say our tools are more holistic. It feels there's a holistic nature to all the bells and whistles, the candles, the icons, all that kind of stuff. It plays on all the senses.
Yeah, very much so. But since we've landed on the topic of tools, that is something I was curious about from you. So, as you are going about your daily labors, what are some of those tools? What are the tools for growing in holiness in a Catholic monastic order?
So one of the main tools that we have is praying the hours of the office. So we do matins, lauds, prime, and these are all Latin terms for those who aren't Catholic, and they're like, what are these weird words you're saying? So if I put it in English, it's office of readings, morning prayer, prime. I don't know what the English equivalent with prime is, but during prime, we focus on the saints who have gone before us. And usually there's a reading of the martyrology, who has died on this day in the past, who has died for their faith. Then we have mid-morning prayer, midday prayer, mid-afternoon prayer, evening prayer, and night prayer. So a full day of prayer. So those are a lot of the disciplines that keep you on track. They become, at first, when you enter into a life like this, they feel like distractions from what you should be doing. But as you progress, you realize it's the main work. That this is these little moments of brevity that we have throughout our day. Because, for example, midday prayer that we pray at noon takes 10 minutes. I mean, it's not very long at all. It's not a huge endeavor, especially when you've been doing it so long, you practically have it memorized. But it's remembering to breathe throughout your day. So it's giving your day this constant rhythm to it, so that whether you're feeling overworked or feeling stressed out about a particular situation, when the bell rings, you go, oh, that's right. Okay. I need to take a step back. I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to breathe, and I'm going to focus on the Lord. One of my favorite aspects about each of our prayers is we always start it by saying, oh God, come to my assistance. And like we were saying, sometimes when you get wrapped up in the trappings of things, you don't think about what you're doing anymore. You know that it's holy and it's helping you grow. But when you memorize things, sometimes you're saying what you've memorized. It's better those good words coming out of your mouth than something else. But there have been moments in religious life where this foundational thing that I do every day has been exactly, it's met me where I was at. So, maybe I've had a really, really, really rough conversation with someone, and then I need to pause and do my prayers. And the first thing I'm saying is, I cross myself as, oh God, come to my assistance. And I'm not just saying it from rote memory anymore, but I'm feeling it. I'm praying it. I'm crying out, God, I need your assistance. So a lot of times people might think, because we do all our prayers in Latin. So, for example, I don't say, oh God, come to my assistance, I Deus in agitorium meum intende, Domine ad adiovando me festina. I still know what I'm saying. So there's this ministry that's going on. I'm not just praising God, but the very words of Scripture, even, which we're praying the Psalms, are ministering back to me. So the prayers in general help me grow in holiness, not just because they're edifying, but by their consistency as well, and by the pauses that it gives me throughout my day. We also, each religious order is different. I think even in the Orthodox Church, that's pretty similar to Catholicism, in that you meet one group of sisters and they're going to look a bit different than another group of sisters. So in our order, we do a holy hour every day where we spend an hour in prayer. During that time, we'll pray a rosary, but for the most part, it's just silence. And it's taking that moment and that time to have those personal prayers. So we're not just doing these rote prayers that we pray every day that's always the same. Well, every day is a little different, but Psalms every day. But we also have that time where we're spending time with the Lord and talking to him. And for me, especially coming from a Protestant background where I had no connection at all with memorized prayers other than the Lord's Prayer, and I didn't pray it much because it didn't make sense to me to pray a memorized prayer at the time. having that freedom and that time set inside in my day to be like, oh Jesus, like what is going on with my life today? How am I going to handle this situation? Like, or if I see that that desire in myself, like you were mentioning earlier, to live this vocation out of the selfishness instead of out of giving. I'm like, oh Lord, I can't believe I can't believe the conversation I had with that person went that direction, and that's not how I want those to go. Like, how can I grow in holiness so that I don't do that again? So, and that applies. I think having those times in your day applies to addiction recovery as well. If you're not assessing what's going on a daily basis, then it's really easy to fall back into addiction. You know, I think one of the biggest parts of addiction is when the blinders go up and you stop paying attention to the little yellow flags that start coming up. Because if you're not paying attention to those little flags, if you're not reflecting, if you're not being introspective about your interactions with others, your thoughts, your internal life, your thoughts, you're going to ignore those yellow flags and the red flags are going to come up. And the same happens in religious life. I'm here trying to grow in holiness. And if I'm not paying attention to the little yellow flags, you know, a weird conversation with someone that I think, mea culpa, like my fault, I could have done that differently. If I'm not paying attention to the yellow flags, they're just going to become red flags. And that's not the direction I want to go.
Yeah, definitely not. I figure, usually people don't wake up thinking, this is the day I'm going to destroy my life again.
Exactly.
Right.
It's incremental.
Yeah. The little flags. And I'm appreciating this so much because, in our clinical work, I mean, we'll talk about what are the early warning signs, and a mark of progression, like maturing in sobriety, is realizing and seeing more and more of those. It's not this big mystery. Why did I relapse? You get a sense of like, oh, that's why. Oh, that's why. Oh, that's why. And you talk with the long-timer people who have had, multiple decades of sobriety, and they talk about still, multiple decades in, still pausing for that daily inventory, kind of the recovery version of like confession or some sort of like self-examination to be like, what is going on in my life? And it's a look inward. So you talked about how foundations become, you talked about foundations and how habits are part of foundations and how they kind of become each other. You do something habitually, it becomes the foundation of your life. And it's kind of a way of creating boundaries within your own life, which build a lot of confidence. And I'm really loving hearing your description of the prayers. And 7 times a day we pause, and sometimes it's going to be rote. You memorize it. Sometimes it engages the intellect. Sometimes it just engages the mouth, but it engages some part of you. And it sounds like that becomes kind of an anchor point. So because I imagine there's lots of days where you just don't want to, like you're saying, I don't want, I just don't want to do it. And I would say that's the case with any discipline, Catholic, Orthodox, sobriety, physical fitness or something. But that's when it seems like it's really important to have the external framework, or to have the framework to be part of, to pull you along to the next time when you do feel it from within. And I would agree, because I grew up also very Protestant and didn't do Catholic prayer, or didn't do memorized prayers except for the Lord's Prayer, but then not too much because it was too Catholic to do that. But now that I do have these memorized prayers, it's not just like a pre-written prayer, but these are also like ancient prayers too.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of like, I'm praying the same prayers that Saint Seraphim of Sarov used to pray, and wow. And they seep into my subconscious though. Like the more that I pray the Psalms and the prayers, like when I do go to like fashion my own prayer, it ends up being made up of snippets of these like other prayers that the saints have written. So I wonder what you think of this, where, I mean, obviously when we're praying, we're directing our focus to God, and we're seeking the intercession of God and of the saints. And there's automatically power in that. But even aside from that, even the very practice of I pause 7 times a day, I pause once a day, I slow down, I remember. It seems like that begins to reorient your life, or like, especially at the level you're talking about. And it was really resonating with this thought of like seeing the prayers as the interruption and then coming to see them as actually that might be the real world. It seems like there's a transformation that happens just in the practice of doing it and readjusting your priorities to accommodate it. What's your thought there?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I don't think about it as much anymore unless somebody comes to join me in the prayers, because then I'm seeing it from their perspective, and I'm kind of seeing how much this life has completely changed my life, how much this regimen has completely changed the way I do things, the way I think about things, especially if, like, I think of a couple summers ago, I was spending time with some friends who are Protestant. I was staying with them, and I would say, okay, my bell's going on, I have to go pray real quick. And they'd be like, oh, okay. And I've known these ladies for 20 years, I think, at this point. And so it was interesting seeing them reacting to me being this more disciplined person and putting more priority in this, and how it shifted kind of the focus of my day. My day wasn't spent thinking, I'm with my friends, I'm just going to hang out with my friends, I'm going to do what I want to do, I'm going to chase joy and happiness and pleasure with my friends. None of it's sinful or bad or anything like that. But there's this anchor to every day of my life now, where if I don't enter into those pauses, it feels like something's missing all of a sudden. It's not as peaceful. It feels more tumultuous. Again, like my anchor is missing and I'm a ship on the sea being tossed about. And the funny thing is, before religious life, my life didn't feel that tossed about at all. It was anchored in other things. We all have something that we're anchoring in our life in. Maybe it's just our phones. I do ministry on TikTok, and I see people anchoring their life on their phones. I see creators out there who are posting 10 videos a day. And I just think, well, that's their anchor. Like, I don't know what their faith is in God or what kind of spirituality they have, but it's apparent that their anchor is getting their thoughts and their information out there and getting feedback from other people. And that's become their anchor. That feels like a very tumultuous anchor for me, because there's too many trolls. Yeah,
that.
Yeah, and not to mention, growing psychologically through the years, realizing how much of a people pleaser I've always been. That's an addiction that the phone can easily play into. It's, am I making everybody happy? Is everybody liking what I'm saying? Are they liking what I'm doing? Did they like that? How many likes? So making sure that the anchor of my day is focused more on prayer and less on, all of my own possible addictions is helpful. So it changes everything.
Yeah, I love the language of the anchor, or like the functional value. Like, I can say all day long, oh, I value time with my wife and kids, but if at every spare moment I'm like reaching for my phone or reaching for work or something else, well, I mean, that's my functional true love, because that's what I'm actively and readily allowing time for. And I might kind of recognize, hey, that's not proper, but until I actually begin to shift away from that, I'm still anchored to that. So,
and starting to listen to yourself and the discrepancies there. If you say, oh, I'm very passionate about this, but like you said, you don't devote a lot of your time to it, you devote your time elsewhere, then how passionate are you? Like, if you're back to sobriety, if you're passionate about sobriety how much of your time and energy are you focusing on setting those boundaries, on establishing good habits, and on walking that daily, even if you fall, on getting back up and walking it daily? How important that to you? Or how much are you letting yourself be distracted by other things and ignoring those little yellow and red flags as they come up?
Yeah. When you talk about paying attention to the inner voice, I think that's an inner maneuver that a lot of traditions are aware of and talk about with a lot of different language. But, something like, the inner voice, or, the Orthodox talk about the nous, the spiritual eye, and awakening that part. In clinical world, we talk about mindfulness, talk about curiosity, talk about, that sort of presence. But again, however you call it and however you get there, that process of I'm cultivating an awareness of what's going on, whether it's my body saying, hey, you need to eat more, or you need to eat less, or you need to move more or something, or the sense of, hey, you had this interaction, that conversation went that way, maybe you should do something about it. Or the sense of like, wow, you just devoted this much time to a work project that ultimately doesn't really matter when like your kids are right there. Those are the daily choices that come up for us. And I know for me, there's a lot of ways to ignore it, or to minimize it, or explain it away, or to like shame myself over it and just wallow in like this hopeless self-pitying, like, oh, I'm failing and I'm never going to get better. I'm not even going to try anymore. All of that's really easy. But the work of recognizing the awareness and keeping it around, and daring to boldly look at it until you find the gumption to do something about it. And that seems like the essence of spiritual life, of sober life. And some people do it, a lot of people don't, but like some people will do it and they will make it, they will thrive.
Yeah, there's this existential fear, I guess, of looking internally, because we assume that if we truly look at ourselves for who we really are, and we see how broken and how messed up we truly are, there's no hope of change. And that is, I think, the trap that the majority of people who aren't looking inwardly, who have their TV on 24 hours a day because they don't want silence, because silence is going to cause them to look inward even for a split second. So they have to have noise all the time. That's what causes so many people to not just have those quiet moments and look inwardly. And so that's where in sobriety work, especially clinically, having those success stories is really helpful, to be able to say, look, that is common. That is common across humanity. We're all terrified to see how awful we are because we feel like there's nothing we can do about it. So clinically, what can we do about it? Because there are people who have done something about it. And then spiritually, realizing that we're not alone in feeling that way, that there are saints who have gone before us, who have succeeded in looking internally and realizing, oh, I don't like what I'm seeing there, but it doesn't have to stay that way. And understanding that the way the tools, getting back to tools, the tools that they had to be able to grow in those ways, to be able to get past and be better, we have access to as well. First and foremost, through Christ, through his sacrifice for us, through the strength that he gives us through his Holy Spirit, that we're not just drifting out here hopelessly alone, unable to grow or change, but that we have that hope. We have hope. Hope is more important than I think we realize sometimes, but just having that hope that things can get better. There might be people listening who are struggling with sobriety, and hope is the one thing that's getting them through every day.
On the other end of that, I see people who they don't have that clear hope, and I see how it's like an extra struggle for them. Like, in addition to this is already hard, now having to kind of fabricate some reason to do it. it's a hard thing. And I don't know, I know my heart goes out to these people maybe a little bit more, because I'm like, like I can't make this for you. Like I can't give this to you if you don't want it. I mean, I can give you tools, I can give you advice, I can give you science and theory and practice, and I can give you my opinion. I could even give you kind of a finger pointing, there's the Lord Jesus. But like, if there's a certain point at which, a person's not open to certain avenues for hope, and I'm like, well, I'll give you everything else, but okay, we'll see what happens.
And the empathy kicks in when you hear about situations like that, and you meet people and you're talking, especially you as a counselor, when you're talking with people about things like that, because I think all of us have those moments. I can at least look back over my many years of life at this point and think there are moments where I wanted to change. I wanted so much for my life to be different. I wanted for things to be different, but I just felt stuck, like there was no hope. And so sometimes that first step was just trying to get hope, and I think, especially for maybe even people who struggle with depression, realizing that you can't just will yourself to have hope. That can be terrifying and debilitating.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't just will yourself to have hope. No, not like a long-term sustaining one anyway. So, no, there's so much here, and I love the way that it's our conversation's touching on both like the very spiritual. I'm not going to say ethereal, because I think it's more real than that. But also like the very practical. Getting it down into like how you manage your time and what you where you devote your energy and everything. So I wonder. So say there's a listener who's kind of getting a sense for, yes, I'd like to use some of these tools. I'd like to pursue the inner life in some way. Maybe within a faith tradition, maybe not, but still kind of recognizing there's something to this idea of at least the daily pause, or at least like the daily inventory. Not everyone is in a monastic order. Not everyone should be. So, so y'all don't try to be Sister Lisa just yet. But what would you say, Sister Lisa? What's a good beginner step for someone?
Okay, a couple thoughts. One is do something that works for you. So, growing up in the Protestant tradition that I did, my youth pastor all the time would talk to us about getting up every morning and praying and reading your Bible. And I just could not. I was not a morning person, but I found at the end of my day that I loved debriefing. I loved saying, "Hi, Jesus. I'm laying here in bed. No one else is around, and it's just me and you. And this is how my day's gone." And I started doing that even as a little girl, not consistently, but just off and on. And as I got into my teen years, I turned that to journaling, and that was a really helpful tool for me. So it's good to hear what other people are doing, but it's imperative that you find something that fits with your life. So I don't know if you've had this experience during the Great Lent, the Lenten fasts, where you get overly zealous about a fast. You're like, this, and this. I'm going to do all the things. This is going to be Lent boot camp this year. I'm ready for it. And then I did that, I think the first or second year I became Catholic, and in confession, I was talking to the priest. He's like, well, what is your Lenten fast? And I said, oh, I couldn't decide. So this, and this. And he was like, oh, no. One. Just pick one of those. And I was like, oh. And in fact, he says, well, it sounds like a lot of your things are praying, journaling, reading certain spiritual things. So why don't you decide, instead of all those things, to have a holy hour every day? It doesn't even have to be a whole hour. You just spend a half an hour doing some of those things. And I was like, oh, yeah, that is more manageable for my life, because trying to get in all 5 things was making me fail miserably. I was setting myself up for failure. But choosing to do one thing that incorporated some of those in it was much more helpful. So I would say for somebody who's starting out, finding the time of day that's good for you. Obviously, if you're really busy at work all day, it might not be a good idea to stop at noon every day, and on your lunch break to have some quiet time, because maybe it's an interruptible lunch break. And so it's not going to be conducive. But maybe it's something as simple as if there's a church in the area that's open during the day, just stopping by, on your way into work, just to pray for a minute. Something little, there's so many different things. When we get excited about growing in a particular way, especially spiritually, just anyway, when we get excited about growing, we have a tendency to overdo it. Like all the gym rats in January who have made their New Year's resolutions, and they're going to get in there and go to the gym every day. Maybe what they need to do is just start with once a week and just get into that really simple habit, and then go, okay, where can I fit another day? And, build on the simplicity. So I'd say, do what works for your schedule, do what works for where you're at, and start simple and then build on that simplicity. I did not pray 7 times a day 4 years ago. I started going to daily mass first. That was a big step for me, and getting that in my regular life. And then from there, I moved on to praying Vespers once a week with a group of friends. And then I moved on from there. And so don't bite off more than you can chew, because it'll set you up for failure. Just start simple, start with what works for you, and then build on it.
Yeah. Start simple, start small, start with something where you can kind of be guaranteed to succeed with a little bit of effort, especially if you're new at this. Mm-hmm. And ideally you do this the rest of your life. There will be plenty of time to challenge yourself a little bit more each time. Mm-hmm. And at some point, that becomes appropriate. But definitely starting small.
None of us started learning math, jumping into long division right away, right? We all started with 1 + 1.
No, pretty much.
So just start with 1 + 1.
Yes. I appreciate the way you were just talking about this and talking about what's your Lenten fast. And maybe I begin to pray a little bit a day. Maybe I begin to go to daily mass, or this year I gave myself the challenge of going to matins every morning that I didn't have an early morning appointment. Which again, when I didn't do this my first year of being Orthodox, I've been at this for a few years. So I'm okay, I'm kind of ready, and I'm trying to learn how to become a reader anyway. So it kind of makes sense for me, I think. And it's been challenging. But you're talking about beginning things and adding things, and not just, I'm not going to do this other thing. And I know that there is also that to Lent. We don't eat meat, we don't eat dairy, and things. I kind of also step away from muffins, because me and muffins. But I think that combination is really important also, to not just not do something.
Yeah.
That it has kind of a weird feel, but when you don't do something and then you start to do something else, there's a completion there and a fullness.
We don't realize sometimes that when we're saying no to something, it means we're automatically going to be saying yes to something else. And so it's imperative, when you are going to give up something, what are you going to replace it with? Let's say you're giving up coffee for Lent. If you don't have something you're going to place it with, maybe you have that oral fixation, that Freud always talks about, and you need to be exactly. If you're going to give up coffee, you better be putting something else in your cup, because you're going to still be reaching for your cup. You have that habit in place. You have that oral fixation. For some reason, that's the only thing I ever remember from Freud. And so if you're going to say no to coffee, what are you saying yes to? Are you saying yes to tea? Are you saying yes to water? If you're going to say no to addiction, what are you saying yes to? And you have to think about both sides of that, because that's going to help your no. That's going to help the resolve of your no. The more you know what the yes is. Whereas if I just carry around an empty cup, after a while, I'm going to be I'm just going to go get some coffee. Because that's really what I want in this cup right now.
Right.
And it's
or
empty.
Yeah, or you'll be saying yes to Hangry Sister Lisa, and I don't know that we want Hangry Sister Lisa. So.
Hangry Sister Lisa just gets really emotional. I think I'm really hungry, guys.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Oh, well, Sister Lisa, thank you so much for pausing and taking time with me to talk about these things and to share some some wisdom, some perspective from a monastic order in the desert. And I really love catching up. If a listener wanted to stay in touch with you, follow your work, support your work, where can they find you on the webs or in the world?
I am on TikTok unless the government shuts it down. So my handle, I guess, or whatever it is on TikTok is Sister Lisa H, like all spelled out. Someone else had the name Sister Lisa, and so I just threw my last initial on there. So Sister Lisa H, I post videos on there talking about a variety of things, talking about spirituality, answering questions about Catholic religious life, and then sometimes also just making funny videos because I have a quirky sense of humor. And then I also have a website. Well, it's not my personal website, but my order's website. So as we're working on becoming an established Catholic religious order, we currently function under the title of the League of the Blessed Sacrament. It's a group of lay people who are living as religious and in devotion to Christ in the Blessed Sacrament and the Eucharist. And so I can give you that. It's Blessed Sacrament League. .com, I think, or something like that. I don't know. I almost never go to the website.
Yeah.
But it's got good information on there. So, yeah.
Cool. That's great. And I'll have all of that in the liner notes.
Great.
But yeah. So if you would like to learn more about Catholic monasticism and how to start a new order, League of the Blessed Sacrament is where you find Sister Lisa H, which would be good. And if you're interested in following me, and I hope you are, I'm on Instagram for the show at New Pattern Counseling, and although the podcast is Outer Circle Inner Stillness, but my clinic is New Pattern Counseling, and my clinic sponsors it. And you can also sponsor the podcast at patreon.com/outer circle. And I do appreciate the support and the ratings, the reviews, the friendly shares, and all of that. If this sort of conversation is helpful and important to you, please join my community. But otherwise, Sister Lisa, thank you again so very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was great to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm so glad. We'll definitely be in touch, and blessed Lent to you.
Thank you.